What's up, everyone? Connor O'Hanlon here for another episode of the Greater Society podcast. Today, I am joining you with a bit of a slight technical difficulty, so I am very happy to just be live. So be sure to throw some stuff in the chat if you are available for for some chat analysis of what has been going on. Yes, Sam, we will be diving into some of the primary elections. I will talk about some of the New York primary elections. I want to focus on one in particular south of New York that is big and important for us as young progressives to note. But yes, we will go and discuss into a variety of different primary elections. So we'll just dive right into some of that stuff. But the big story today, I'm hopping right on it, of course, is President Biden's announcement that he will be canceling 10,000 to 20,000, and we will get into the specifics of that plan, of student loan debt, which is big, and I will talk about the positives. I'll talk about some of the limitations, because there are some, and I'll talk about kind of the response a bit and the justification for it going into that. Then, because I was off last week, there's another primary I also want to talk about, that being Liz Cheney from last week. And I also want to analyze last week's major bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, the lead up to that, the passage of it, and like what it entails, as well as how it will affect the midterm elections. And then in the closing bit, I want to talk a little bit about something that may seem a little bit hyper online, but has seemed to infiltrate and dominate some areas of, let's just say, social media. Let's say TikTok, some of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I mean, I've seen it kind of throughout YouTube, especially. I like watching a lot of debates on YouTube, and I've seen it seep in there. And that is the quote manosphere. And I think it's incumbent upon someone like me that might look like they would fit in that category to take some time to dissect it, break it down, and explain why masculinity can be good, but also can be bad, and why we have to learn how to balance all of that out. Like everything else in life, have a good balance to make things right. So the first thing we're going to dive into, of course, is the student loan cancellation. I do have a little video of Biden's speech. I'm not going to play the whole thing. It was 21 minutes. I'll try to let it run for like 2 or 3 minutes, see where it lands. I have it at about when he's actually talking about some of the specifics. Basically, if you don't want to listen to the first 8 or 9 minutes of it, the beginning is Biden talking about his experience becoming, the first person in his family to go to college and get a degree, similar, frankly, to what I've had to experience, being the first person in my family to go to college, or get a degree from college, I should say. And then it's more about the justifications, which I will dive into after. And this is like more about the specifics of his plan. And I'll let it run. And he kind of rambles for quite a bit after. So I might just cut it off at some point and just take it from him. But it's important, I think, to hear it from the man himself who plans on doing this. So without hopeful interruptions from advertisements, let's see what we got.
It's time for the payments to resume. Second, my campaign for president, I made a commitment. That would provide student debt relief, and I'm honoring that commitment today. Using the authority Congress granted the Department of Education, we will forgive $10,000 in outstanding federal student loans. In addition, students who come from low-income families, which allowed them to qualify to receive a Pell Grant, will have their debt reduced $20,000. Both of these targeted actions are for families who need it the most. Working and middle-class people hit especially hard during the pandemic making under $125,000 a year. If you make more than that, you don't qualify. No high-income individual or high-income household on top of the 5%, in the top 5% of incomes, by the way, will benefit from this action, period. In fact, about 90% of the eligible beneficiaries make under $75,000 as family. Here's what that means. If you make under $125,000, you get $10,000 knocked off your student debt. If you make under $125,000 a year and you received a Pell Grant, you'll get an additional $10,000 knocked off that total, for a total of $20,000 relief. 95% of the borrowers can benefit from these actions. That's 43 million people. Of the 43 million, over 60% are Pell Grant recipients. That's 27 million people who will get $20,000 in debt relief. Nearly 45% can have their student debt fully canceled. That's 20 million people who can start getting on with their lives.
I think that's a good point to transition back over here, because those are like the highlights from the initial reading of this, I guess, executive order that they're going to be passing. And reiterate, because I know that was a little quiet, $10,000 for federal loans. Again, the government doesn't have the authority to cancel private loans, but the government, and specifically the president, has the unilateral authority to cancel student loan debt that is federally held. Thus, which is the majority of majority of student loan debt, which is nearing $2 trillion before this. When the president has that authority, they can, of course, cancel all of it, as we will talk about later. But they also can change this stuff so that, like he's saying, the Pell Grant, which is a specific grant to help lower income folks, that also doubles the amount of forgiveness that they're going to give. So that is, I think, is an ideal way to reduce the amount of people with outstanding student loan debt without the full loaf. And again, I will give my full opinion on that in a second. But in general, 10,000 across the board is significantly better than I had expected for a very long time. I have to say that I did not fully expect to see student loan cancellation under the Biden administration. I thought it might have fallen out of favor. I might have thought it might have been the campaign promise that they didn't take seriously. I mean, I have some Twitter followers that love, and I love you. You send me stuff every time that there's some movement on this issue. That's great. It's just that it historically has been so minute and means tested and specific that it's not worth even mentioning until now, where you have literally 20 million people that will have their student loan debt fully eradicated. You will have 20 million people that will have no debt from going to school, which is extremely, extremely positive, as I personally don't believe that you should be subjugated to a lesser education because of the amount of money that you have, or the lack of money that you have, I should say, realistically. But and that's another bit to dive into as well. But the one thing that I want to point out too, that we didn't get from the Biden video here, is the cap on the repayment, like the forced repayment, basically. So functionally, they're coming up with a new repayment plan that will focus on income-based repayment. Currently, the money that you could spend on your repayment is 10% of your discretional income. So discretionary income is income that is after essentials. It is after, obviously, after tax. It's after housing, food, like the specifics that you basically need to live, and discretionary spending being that like you could just have after all of that. Currently, it's 10%. Now they're knocking it down to 5%, which is really good. And then going from that, once you get to the point where it's knocked down to that 5% of your discretionary monthly income, if you pay for over 20 years consistently, and again, that sounds like a long time, and it sure the hell is, but if you pay on time that minimum at least over 20 years, which a lot of people will end up paying the whole thing off before 20 years or whatever it might be, but if that is the case, you will end up getting the remainder of your balance canceled, which is huge. If you have, there's other different minor specifics that would target specific areas. So like they have public workers that will get their cancellation sooner. They have people that will start to qualify for cancellation once that they join the military and they have certain time spent there. It is all good stuff that is building up. I think that and I'm looking over at my phone because I am checking that everything is still working. My chat on my computer is not functionally working, so I'm going to pull up another window just so I can see everybody. But just bear with me there. The overall end point of this is really beneficial, I believe, to the potential. The potential upside is giant. I'll just say that. And that's to, there is multiple ways to look at this. The upside from the American people, and then there's the upside. Oh, wait, so I can still see Jordan chatting, so we should hopefully be okay. I don't need to have dual screen of myself. But I don't know what's going on, but I'm glad you guys are here to witness it. But let's start from the individual level. There's the individual and then there's the systematic, right? On the individual level, you as a person, and I can use myself as an example, technically speaking, due to some circumstances that I started to doubt that we would get student loan cancellation. I had help. It is not a White Claw. This is a Bang Energy. Now, it might be a Rainbow Unicorn Bang Energy, but it is not a White Claw. Do not drink and stream, friends. But due to circumstances that I had the luck of, someone helped, a family member helped me pay off my student loan debt. Now I just pay them. So there's a good and bad for that. So the decrease in interest payments, of course, being one of them. But frankly, it's kind of sucks because now I'm like, oh well, I could have just waited a couple months and I wouldn't have to pay. Because I'll just be honest, it was more than $10,000 and I'm ending up repaying here. But that's okay because maybe my grad student loans will get helped here. But let's just take myself for an example. Once my ability to kind of dissect my life from the student loan that I had, basically saying like, okay, I don't have to worry about the interest growing astronomically. I can kind of pay this off over 4 or 5 years, and I can also work to build wealth, which is the whole point of this, is to build the American dream here. Because that's always been the point. That's the point of this show. That's the point of my former campaigns. That's the point of supporting progressive candidates, is to build upon what the potential of what the original idea of what the American dream was. So for me, I am now sitting in my own house because of the ability to save money and build a plan moving forward that wasn't tied to specifically $20, $30, $40,000 in student loan debt that I had to pay off before I could get money for a home. And now dissect that from myself and say, okay, the individual that maybe has a significant other, they just got married. Maybe now that couple might be able to form a family, have children because they can afford to have them, because they can afford to put a roof over their head, because they can afford to pay for quality food instead of paying $200, $300, $400, $500 every single month to the student loan processor while accruing interest at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% interest. That is how you start to claw back at millennials, Gen Z, getting wealth and building it the way that our parents and our grandparents were able to do it previously before this massive amount of student debt was thrown upon us. You can buy a house, you can buy a car, you can actually attain some level of wealth, some level of mobility that instead of being grasped down and pulled down by the claws of student loan debt, you have the potential to grow out of that. Now, the systematic impact now, and this is opinion, so you could take it with a grain of salt, but this is my opinion, and there are plenty of potential ways that you can look at it otherwise, but I see this, and I said this when Biden was elected, and Jordan, I will address that question in a second. When Biden was elected, I had said to people, if he canceled all student loan debt, he would immediately become one of the greatest presidents ever elected. And why did I believe that? Not because it would personally benefit me, although at the time it would have. It would be he would become one of the greatest presidents because of the economic boom that you would see from young people. I'll say 50 and under, the people most impacted. And again, there are people that are older than 50 with student loan debt, by the way, but the majority of people in that millennial generation, young Gen Xers, older Gen Z, that have student loan debt will have the ability to do what I just said on the individual level. And if you have generations, you have frankly, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, as Biden talked about, 20 million people having their whole balance wiped out, and another 23 million having it significantly reduced. That is talking about a economic boom that I could only imagine would be comparable to the 1950s with New Deal spending and discretionary spending by the government that spent money to create housing opportunities for veterans. That you guys all know where I'm coming from with the 1950s and the investments in communities, etc. Right? So, but it's a different type of investment. Because instead of saying, like, here's a bunch of cash, handing it to them, or here's a house, handing it to them, you are just lifting the chains basically off of people and freeing them to say, I'm going to go chase this dream. I'm going to go chase that opportunity to own this, or I'm going to go chase that opportunity to go start a business. Because I don't have this debt. I can go get a loan to start a business. I can go get a loan. I can go get a mortgage because now my credit score isn't getting destroyed by having student loan debt. So that is the way that I look at it, is an economic stimulus. This is not even the full thing. Like I said, if he did all of the student loan debt, you would see an economic boom I think that we would never have seen before. This is big, and I think it will benefit. And again, at the end of his speech, he talks about there's clawbacks, there's way to get money back, there's way to pay for it, there's this, there's that, and the other thing. That's not my concern. My concern is making sure that people have the opportunity to go and chase the American dream the way that every other generation before us has. And that is the key. Do I think that college admissions will increase? I don't know if the admissions will increase. I have a hope that they will. I have a hope that now that this has been done, you will see the avenues of lessening the burden for education. And that means for college, and that means for trade schools. Because here's the thing. If you limit education just to college, you're missing a group of people. If you limit to say, like, all right, like, we're going to wipe the student loan debt and we're just going to let it go back to normal, the reality is that the amount of student loan debt that's actually being canceled and is nominally not that high if you let the cycle continue. Because every year, millions of students take out those loans. I mean, as someone that's going to grad school, I had to take out a loan like last week. So each year you're looking at just millions and millions of people adding on to it, plus the increasing rise in cost. So you can look at it as in, yeah, they might have an increased admissions rate, but this will be beneficial in isolation. But a smart, systematic approach to this, and again, this is why I'm talking about my ideal, which I can kind of pivot into here. My ideal would be, instead of 10,000, wipe it clean. Wipe 50,000 clean. You know, because 10,000 is what Biden ran on. 50,000 is what Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren supported. All of it is what Bernie Sanders supported. But the most, quote, radical of people that end up in this conversation, let's take Bernie for this example, also advocate for making some form of education free. In fact, Bernie's the only one that I've seen that's advocated for making trade schools free. Other than, of course, myself. But that doesn't count. I don't count. The idea of, okay, cancel the student loan debt. Now, we're going to reset the system. Biden admits in his speech, the system is broken. They wouldn't do this if they didn't think so. So if you say system's broken, we're going to cancel 10,000 and let it go, that's stupid. My solution, and this is a solution, and it's a bare minimum solution if you ask me. It's one of the moving pieces. You have at least, we all know about community colleges, right? So back in the day, I'll just say collectively, my parents, when they were my age, they didn't go to these schools, but in theory, that generation, older Gen Xers and baby boomers, had the opportunity to go to free community colleges. Free. Tuition free. Not 5,000, not 10,000, not 15,000. Free. That's entry level number one. Free community colleges. Bernie Sanders has a proposal for that. The next level, actually something that I ran on for state rep, and I think that someone should steal this. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Anybody that's running for office listening, you can have this. Every single state in the union should have at least one, tuition-free public school. At least one. If we really want to get down to the heart of this, all public universities should be free, but that's an ideal. I think there should be at least one free state school in every single state, functionally creating a public option for education, the same way that many people, Biden included, support a public option for healthcare. It's been done. It's been done on the community college level. It's been done in other countries where they make universities free or at least cheap. And the idea and the functionality of why we would want a public option on education in the university level is because if you create one opportunity for free here and the private school has to compete, and again, there are flaws to this system. We can obviously discuss those. The private school to compete with getting enough admissions would have to lower the costs, or would at least have to provide more financial aid, which financial aid in this country is a joke, but at least provide more financial aid to students, not just athletes, to students to come to the school. That would functionally lower the cost, which at least would lower the overall public student loan crisis that we have in tandem with cancellation of student loan debt. Because I believe wipe it all out and reset the system. That's me who has paid most of my student loan debt off. That's me who's had to take another loan to go to school again. But I know, and we all functionally know, that this is going to be beneficial for the economy, and it's going to be beneficial to the individuals. And frankly, I think it will be beneficial to the Democrats in the midterm elections, which is why I think he's doing it now. I wish that he did more. I wish that he did it sooner. I wish that it could have been the whole thing. But woulda, coulda, shoulda at this point, I will take this. I will run this into the end zone, and I'm happy that Biden has taken action on this because it is important. It is important. Yes, Eric, you're right too. You said yours paid off. Cancel it all. Cancel it all. They need to fix the overall system. The system is broken. Biden said it himself. It is exactly a problem. Will this be the end of community college? No, it won't be the end of community college. That's for sure. That's not the end of community college because community college is still an affordable option. Now, if you have my way of things, you would still be able to provide for, in my ideal, you have multiple options for free. Like you wouldn't just, let's just take Pennsylvania for an example. If you took one, again, if the idea is to have one in every state, if you took, let's just say, Bloomsburg and made it that's the public university, the free one, that is really far for some people. And some people still wouldn't be able to afford to live like on campus. So that's the ability of creating an opportunity for community colleges. And community colleges might be able to specify in more specific things. Let's just take Bucks County Community College for an example, where it could be, okay, we're gonna focus on creating opportunities within the pharmaceutical industry, which, like, whatever we all think of that, right? We're in such a close proximity to a lot of these pharmaceutical companies that's the kind of the avenue that we're going to create. And that's the way that you sell these colleges at that point, where they're specified for what they do. That is personally, that's, I think, a much more opportunistic way to look at this, rather than saying, okay, you can't afford to go to Yale, you have to go to community college. Or you might be able to get into some of these schools, but the financial aid, yeah, you might have a 4.1, but you don't have a 4.5 GPA, so you might not be able to get enough financial aid to make it viable for you. So yeah, that is a big tough spot there. Question in chat: is it possible that by 2024 some of the effects will begin fading as new students take on the new debt? Absolutely. By 2024, like I said, we're gonna have millions of people going into the system as we just continue this going, right? So it's incumbent upon the administration to provide answers on this, and look, they might not. And I think that's why we be grateful, be happy that we get something here. We get some form of action. We can show, and this is kind of important to talking about the Inflation Reduction Act as well. We can show that government can work for the people, can work for average middle class folks if we put enough pressure on, if we do the right things, if we take action, get in the streets. But that doesn't mean when we get the crust that we shouldn't keep fighting for the rest of the sandwich, right? So this is the eternal struggle of fighting for middle class and working class people in this country, and frankly across the globe. It's not just like there is no end point. That's the struggle of being working class. It's at any point you have to be able to get back up and keep fighting, and that's, it's scary to think about sometimes, but it's the truth. You got to keep getting back up. You got to keep fighting, and you just got to keep moving the needle. That's the way we're going to do it. It's just frankly incumbent upon us to keep going, keep fighting for it. Yeah, and Eric, you're right. The conservatives everywhere are telling us that the world is going to end, and I've seen plenty of arguments that people are like, well, you signed this contract, you did this, you did that. And it's like, well, first of all, at 17 years old, 18 years old, do you really I mean, I'm an accountant. I was good with numbers before I went into school. I don't fully know that I knew exactly how much debt I'd be coming out with. And I don't know exactly, like, okay, this is all of the costs that is going to accumulate. And I had the luck of having parents that helped pay for a good chunk of my school, and I still came out $30,000 in the hole. And I'm lucky. Actually, I unintentionally have my degree right here, but this piece of paper right here is almost $100,000. So it's like that's the type of thing where we have to evaluate on the whole. How do we fix this? It's like, I've heard other people say this, but it's basically just like saying, like, if you have a sickness and they come up with a vaccine, and let's not talk about COVID just because, oh my God, I don't want to have that debate, but if you came up with like a polio vaccine, it'd be like people that had died or had this disease prior that would say like, oh, well, you can't have that vaccine because I had to suffer from the sickness. It's like, no, fix the sickness, cure the disease so that future generations don't have to deal with it. That's the idea. That's the idea of most, I would argue, progressive ideals across healthcare, wealth inequality, etc. But it's very apparent and very easy to see the monetary difference right here. I'm going to show a quick clip here, as this is an interesting little tidbit at the end of this might be louder than the other clip, so I apologize. The volume on this live stream was very off. It was hit or miss. So this is Biden responding to this is after his 20-minute speech laying this all out. This is him getting asked two questions. I think both of the questions are in this, but one actually getting answered. One before this was about Donald Trump's house getting raided, and like whatever. That's the Ducey fellow from Ducey from Fox News, not the other word. So now we have another reporter asking Biden this question.
Mr. President, is this unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who, in fact, do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses? They see why these guys give them all a tax breaks? Is that fair? What do you think?
What about people who paid their loans?
So, what he said there, and I will read it because I know that the audio is a little screwy. The question was, is it unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans? And Biden says, Is it fair? And this is based. I have to say, this is one of the most based clips I've ever seen of Biden. Biden says, "Is it fair to people who, in fact, do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses, if they see one of these guys, meaning the owners of these businesses, getting all the tax breaks? Is that fair? What do you think?" That is some dark Brandon shit right there. That is what you want to see. Unabashed progressive policy. And again, this is not the end of the line. This is not saying, "Yo, this is it. We've reached the promised land." But unabashed progressive policy. Biden said it. "I will never apologize for working for fighting for the working class." I'm sorry, I butchered it, but that is the type of messaging we need out of Democratic politicians. And look, Biden is not always the greatest messenger. He doesn't deliver to the extent that a progressive would want. But in the cases that he does, and we will get into this right after, in the cases that he does, he has to own it and say, "Look, this is what we want. This is what the people want. So if you don't like it, sorry, you can get out of the way," because the vast majority of people approve of what is going on and approve and will be benefiting from this policy. And Eric brings up another point that I didn't touch on yet. Is it fair for $1 million businesses to go bankrupt with no long-term consequences for the individuals running the company? Now, if you don't know, there are multiple companies right now that might be in the top companies that you could think of. Look, let's take one for example. Marvel. Marvel is a company that has gone bankrupt. There are multiple companies that have gone bankrupt, suffer no consequences. The owners get tax breaks. The endless amounts of layoffs where workers get screwed and they're off scot-free. In fact, let's not even talk about bankruptcy. Let's just talk about the PPE loans. The PPE loans, which were billions and billions of dollars that were given out to small businesses and, frankly, large businesses during COVID. Most people didn't have a problem with it because it was helping small businesses. But the second you try to help a middle-class regular worker, oh, God, don't turn on Fox News. Don't turn on freaking Newsmax. Oh, boy, Ben Shapiro might have a conniption because this is helping middle-class people. We can't have that. Now, my company should be able to get thousands of dollars of loans and then have it be forgiven. Because remember, the PPE loans were forgiven. The taxpayers paid for it. That's okay. But God forbid you and I get a break. God forbid the average person catches a break for once. But with that, let's take a look at some more progressive policy. And I'll transition back here for a second. I'll transition back. This is progressive policy. This is a good bill. The Inflation Reduction Act. A good bill. Reminder. A year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, the world was introduced to the term Build Back Better. The supposed New Deal that Joe Biden was going to bring. And the Build Back Better bill, or the plan for it, would have genuinely been some of the most progressive, and I mean progressive, like all-encompassing. Like, I don't mean just like progressive as in like what like the news media would call progressive. I'm talking like old school, New Deal, Great Society type progressive policy. Putting money back into the hands of the working class people, supporting unions, building that on top of a climate policy that would last and provide good paying jobs. That's all encompassing. That's progressive policy. Progressivism is all encompassing. It's intersectional, meaning also intersectional across all of protected classes plus your actual like class. That is how you make lasting policy and a lasting impact in the history books, but that is not what we got. The Build Back Better plan was then split into the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which passed due to the Manchin alliance, and the House Progressive Caucus, I would argue, failed to promote the dual package as one passed. They were supposed to pass both of them at the same time, and of course, Manchin screwed everybody over. So fast forward to about last month, and granted, this has been, worked on throughout, but about last month, Manchin comes out and he goes, you know what? I think we can do this bill. And I think it might have been a little bit less than a month ago where they were like, all right, we can really do this. Reconciliation bill, and basically dial down the Build Back Better plan by like a 20, by like, well, I guess it's reducing by 75%. It's like a 25% of what the original bill was. And that's okay. If you don't like, I think everybody engaging with this and watching this show knows that you can't just judge a bill by its price tag. But with inflation rising, Schumer and Biden give Manchin the ability to go, oh, why don't you just name this bill whatever you want? And the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 is born out of the ashes of the Build Back Better plan, which this bill, although aimed at reducing inflation in theory, is an all-encompassing reconciliation package. And really quickly, again, we go over this all the time, but just in case there's people that are newcomers, reconciliation is a process in which the Senate can pass a bill with a 50, just a plain 50 vote majority, and that sounds silly because it's 50-50, but the vice president can break the tie. So it'd be 51-50. This bill passes, which then allowed for, and I'll just transition on over, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Mostly, I would say, is a bill that focused, and I'll zoom in for folks at home, a bill focused on healthcare, which is a winning issue for Democrats, by the way, and climate. Now, again, the climate provisions in these bills, anytime you have someone like Joe Manchin, Coal Baron Manchin, you're not going to get the extent of the climate provisions that you want. But you can see it down here, that there are these investments in climate, in energy efficient climate reduction, carbon reduction efforts, in providing for solar, wind, fighting. I mean, look, you see like Western drought resiliency. We don't talk about it that much on the program. They don't talk about it much on corporate media. There's a drought in the Midwest that has been going on that has been affecting supply chains for the food supply. Again, something that hits every single one of us, as the majority of our food is actually grown out there. And then with those droughts comes then like the opposite, which I don't know if it's the right term, but you literally get hit with like monsoons in the middle of the country out of nowhere, because guess what? Climate change is freaking real. And voting for climate bills like this would actually help red states probably equally as much as blue states that are on the coasts, because the middle of the country is not isolated from these incidents. In fact, I'd say that there's probably more of these incidents that happen in the Midwest than almost anywhere else, except maybe droughts in California and like hurricanes in the South. We are seeing historic. I mean, the company I work for has to do like extreme disclosures around Winter Storm Uri, which, if you recall, knocked out the Texas power grid in 2021. These are things that continue to affect everybody in this country. Investing in climate bills like this, investing in renewable energy is going to help everyone in the long term. Yeah, Shaz says Earth seems to be acting up in that area of the country too. It 100% is. It's not about your zip code. It's not about whether you wear a red or a blue tie. Now, the voting for this bill matters if you're wearing a red or blue tie. Supporting something like this, and this is what kind of really irks me about the climate change stuff. There's really no benefit for someone like me or progressives in general to push for climate bills, like to push for climate change or like the climate crisis reduction bills, other than we want our planet to be sustainable, inhabitable, farmable. There's nothing that like we personally gain out of this. Like, I have no investment in like solar farms or wind farms that I'm going to get rich off of because of a bill like this. Versus the subsidies, which there are subsidies in this bill for oil and gas companies. That's the bad part of this. They do get rich off of this. They are driven for profit, and the people that own them monetarily benefit from that. So when we weigh this stuff, when you're debating this stuff, remember there is no monetary material benefit to somebody fighting for a climate crisis reduction bill like this versus someone saying, okay, well, we should be investing in oil and gas and whatever. I mean, there are people that own those things, but again, if you want to take the John Fetterman route, make more shit in America. Put Americans in the driver's seat of the 21st century renewable economy, and that's the whole point. I have a whole chapter in my the book that I'm writing about this specific thing. The new American economy is built on sustainable energy if you want to fight for that economy, but you have to choose to do it. This bill also adds in the healthcare piece here is important. It expands Medicare benefits. And this is the biggest part, I think, out of the whole shebang, right? I'll talk briefly here. So come back to me. I'm talking to myself, so the only way that I can kind of describe this is the Affordable Care Act provides subsidies to people that might be of lower income, and that means lower income in comparison to like people that have employer-based healthcare. Because there's some people that are basically working class but don't get employer-based healthcare, and they fall below a certain line. If you have kids, I don't know the exact line, but you would get subsidies from the Affordable Care Act passed back in 2012, I believe. So when that kicked in, they had a 10-year sunset on these subsidies. Thus, the subsidies have been expanded in this bill. The second thing, and I said it a second ago, expansion of Medicare benefits. Now, that's fine. That's great, actually, I should say. Medicare is one of the best government programs that the American economy has ever had. However, the most important part of this bill, I will argue, over the long term, other than the climate provisions, which we need more of, is that the government that runs Medicare will be able to negotiate, and again, it's not all drugs, but will begin to be able to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. Now, you might be asking, Connor, why does that matter? Or, Connor, I thought they already could do that. Which, the answer to that question, the second one, is no, they couldn't do that. Medicare, the single largest purchaser of pharmaceutical drugs in this country, might be the single largest purchaser of pharmaceutical drugs maybe in the world, was not allowed. Not that they couldn't do it to a certain number, not that they couldn't do it to certain drugs. They were not allowed whatsoever to negotiate prices of pharmaceutical drugs. Medicare, that runs at 97% efficiency, which, oh, what about that other 3%, Connor? Well, let me remind you that for-profit insurance companies run at less than 90% efficiency, meaning that these companies run for profit and skim off the top every pharmaceutical sale, every insurance claim that is shot down. That is profit to this company. Versus Medicare, where 3% goes to overhead and the remainder goes to care, that is efficiency. That is why we should have Medicare for all, but that's another story. This allows for the overall reduction in the government's deficit spending every single year, which, for those who care about the debt and the deficit, which I hear crickets from the Republicans, will lower the debt. Technically speaking, it will lower the deficit per year, which will thus will slow the rate of increase for the debt. This is important to note, that Medicare is funded by a specific paycheck tax that every single one of us pays. We all pay into the Medicare fund. So I think we all should want to reduce the costs to the taxpayer while increasing the benefits, because guess what? We can do it. It is a choice. It always has been. Some people, the Republican elected officials, do not support Medicare. They do not support Social Security. You watching this, you might be a Republican. You might think, yeah, why wouldn't I like Medicare or Social Security? These are some of the best programs. I benefit from them, or my dad does, or my grandma does. And yeah, you're right. And every once in a while you get Republicans that LARP and say that they care about Medicare or Social Security. And then they go and cut it. And then they go and vote to cut it. So the benefits here in providing for retired people, specifically, because that's what Medicare is, will benefit us all, because the reduction in spending for these drugs, which also means that which in tandem to this, there's a cap of out-of-pocket expenditures for pharmaceutical drugs for seniors on Medicare of about $2,000 every single year. So more money in grandpa's pocket, more money in grandma's pocket, which that means that you might be getting an extra $20 in the card coming in a couple weeks. You might get an extra Christmas card. I'm kidding, but this means that they can retire and live with dignity, which every single one of us should want for every single other one of us. That's the American dream. Again, this is all in tandem. If you take this stuff together and slam it together, it is a package that we need to really, really be... I mean, grateful might not be the right word, because they're elected to do this stuff, but we should look at this stuff with some level of joy that something is getting passed that is actually going to work for the people. Eric says in the chat, we need to reform Medicare and Social Security, but not in the way that is talked about. I don't necessarily. You say we need to cut it at the very top. Why is someone worth $2 million taking? That is. I don't believe in. Let's just say I don't necessarily believe in means testing. The real way, as a CPA, you lift the tax cap on Social Security tax. That would create solvency for the rest of time functionally. So that would be the way to do it. And yes, I think we should get a Greater Society podcast Discord server going. I probably was going to mention that at the end, maybe getting one started. So that is that. That is the focus of today on the Inflation Reduction Act, as I get myself hyped up here. But I want to talk about some election results, and I got to make sure that these these don't just start auto-playing ads and stuff like that. So let's start with the one that Sam asked me off the bat in the beginning of the show. In New York's 19th congressional district, and the same way that happened in Pennsylvania and happened across the country, is that every single state had their lines redrawn for the congressional seats, for the state house, for the state senate, based on the 2020 census. And the New York seats were really drawn late. Now, this is a seat that was being looked at as a bellwether, I suppose, for the 2022 midterm elections. And that's because this is a swing district. This is, I believe, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if I remember correctly from what I was reading this morning, that the district was about a +2 Biden district, which in a midterm election could easily swing to the R if you look at historical numbers or just numbers in other special elections from maybe 2018 when you saw the swing the other way. Now, Pat Ryan, Democrat, wins this special election running on, is my understanding, and again, now this is my interpretation of the numbers and of what the race was really based on, pushing pro-choice messaging versus the Republican who was trying to rile people up about the Mar-a-Lago raid. Now, let's swing back here. New York politics is a very unique thing. That's how you get Rudy Giuliani to be the mayor. New York politics, the talk radio and all that junk, is very pungent on the right wing. You get a lot of right wing stuff that comes out of New York, which that sounds funny, but it's certain pockets of the area, certain maybe interests that have this ideology, this maybe vitriol of others. You get a lot of old school. I don't even want to put my people in this, but Irish, Italian, different types of older immigrants groups that start to hate on newer immigrant groups, not really recognizing the hypocrisy, the immediate kind of take 1 second to think about what you're saying here, because your ancestors came here a decade ago, 2 decades ago, whatever it is, right? So it's silly, but New York has these swing districts that are a lot more conservative than Queens or the Bronx. And I think the takeaway from the 19th, and this is nothing high-minded about it, is that the Dobbs decision, the decision that overturned Roe versus Wade, will have a significant impact on the 2022 midterms, arguably more than what was expected from the leak. Because let's remember, the leak, in a lot of people's opinion, and I'm still in the middle on it. The leak was kind of seemingly a way to take the air out of people's out of the wings of Democrats that would run on this issue, like the second that it came out, right? I mean, look, we talk about Ashley Eha's running in Pennsylvania's 1st Congressional District. The polling shows that when people know about Brian Fitzpatrick being anti-choice, she shoots up. But it's getting the message out to every single voter. That's the challenge. So I am certainly I'm certainly not sold that we're going to have this outcome that the 19th had, where it's like we're going to run on this issue and everyone's going to know that this guy is anti-choice, which absolutely should be the goal. I think that's the winning strategy, especially in this year. But it was the gap in the time frame is huge. So only time can tell that, like, we can get somebody to know how much this issue will impact the election. So, Eric, I'm not saying that she doesn't have it. What I'm saying is the challenge is making sure that every single freaking voter in the district knows that Fitzpatrick is anti-choice, right? It's not that people don't like her. It's breaking that veil, that thin veil. It's breaking that, and it doesn't just mean like let's dissect it from just here in Bucks County. You can look at any other race. It's making it seem like, okay, some Republicans support it because they have rape and incest exceptions, not fully analyzing the fact that that's basically saying that there are no exceptions. That's basically saying that how do you prove that someone is going to get going to die, or the risk of fatal sickness or even injury, or just, I mean, there's tons and tons of stories since this has passed that where there's outright bans of people getting, of frankly women getting very sick or dying, and they're not getting the care that they need. So we will see that this is the bellwether to lead to more. This is the way that the Democrats can hold on to the House. It's the only way at this point that I see it. I mean, they've passed what they're going to pass. They're not going to, like, we're not going to get some gigantic bill between now and November. We might get some little stuff here and there, but the student loan debt and the Inflation Reduction Act both are like the last ditch. Here's some material goods, and I applaud it. The other race I just want to talk about is Maxwell Frost winning in Florida's, I believe, 10th. Let's see. Believe it's the 10th. Come on. Show me the 10th. All right, it's not. I don't see it on there, but he is a Bernie-supported Gen Z candidate running for Congress in Florida, and he won the Democratic nomination last night. And why is this important? This is important because Generation Z is barely old enough to run for Congress. I'm 26 years old. Maxwell Frost is 25 years old, meaning that he is the youngest that you could be to run for the United States Congress. Yes, you have to be 25 to be an elected congressperson. This is vital. I don't know the breakdown of every bit of this district. I'm not like an election projector guy. I like talking about policy and issues. But this is definitely an interesting thing to follow because he would be the first Gen Z elected congressperson, I mean, ever, technically. I think previously the youngest other person would be Madison Cawthorn, who is my age, and he, of course, lost his primary election earlier this year. So I just want to talk about this really quickly because, of course, so Cawthorn might have started at 25, but because he is a year older, technically I'm a millennial, and so he would be a millennial as well. So he may have been 25. I'm not saying he's the youngest elected official ever, but it would be the youngest currently in the House. But yes, so this is important to note. And the last thing I want to talk about, I don't have an article or anything to talk about, but I just want to talk about it briefly. Last week, chair of the January 6th committee, Republican Liz Cheney, lost her primary election to a even further right Republican who probably votes the same way as her on most things, but isn't as turned off by the Trump movement as she is. I'm bringing this up only to say, when Liz Cheney joins MSNBC, CNN, or if she runs to be vice president or even president in 2024, I'm putting my flag down to say, if you're a Democrat, if you are on the left, if you're a progressive, if you are left of progressive, which I don't think is an issue of anybody that calls himself progressive, but anybody that considers themselves a Democrat should remind themselves that Liz Cheney is, or was until like last year, anti-gay marriage, and she switched, of course, because of the outcomes since with the Trump stuff, and then I think a family member is also gay. She is anti-choice. She has always been and has been parading around that way. And ideologically, the differences between her and the average Republican in Congress are minuscule. I don't want to hear it floated that Joe Biden or whoever the Democratic nominee should pick her as a vice president. Don't want to hear it. Don't even want to entertain it. We need to know that our party stands up for the principles and the values that we were talking about earlier, and ditch the Manchin stuff, because we're going to get John Fetterman in there, and so Manchin could be 51, but we need principles and basics of our party that are fundamental to our ideology and our party identity. That way we can continue to fight for our collective rights here. So Eric points out before she ran for Senate in 2014, she was pro-gay marriage. Then she threw her gay sister under the bus to try to win the Wyoming election. That is precisely the reason that we have a problem. She's a finger up in the wind type of politician, and that's not what we want. That's not what we need. And she's a Republican. So if she wants to run for president, she should run as a Republican, not as a Democrat. She's got a lot of issues if she's going to try to run as a Democrat. So good riddance. She should continue doing her January 6th stuff, because that was the best thing that she's probably done in her entire career. Now, The final thing, and this is not going to be a total deep dive because I think this warrants multiple, deeper looks at the quote manosphere. But I want to give everybody an overview of what this is because it's been popping up in my news feeds everywhere. I've been watching debates, I've been watching videos, I've been watching it on TikTok, I've seen it everywhere. And because even the shirt that I'm wearing right now kind of falls under some of this rise and grind cultural, I don't even know, like, what zeitgeist maybe. This is David Goggins, so take that for what it is. But this is a balance that I want to push back against, and I want to identify so that we as, this is an online show. This might sound hyper online, but it's not, because I'm telling you it's infecting young men especially. And if it's infecting young men, then we have to identify it as a problem moving forward, because we can't just isolate like a huge giant gap of people, especially young men, I think, when they are feeling isolated already. That's how they fall into the hands of Jordan Peterson. That's how they fall into the hands of Shapiro's and Crowders and all these people that are online. The manosphere, and I will read this from the wiki because it's a loose definition, is a collection of websites, blogs, and online forums promoting to varying degrees masculinity, misogyny, and opposition to feminism. Communities within the manosphere include men's rights activists, incels, men going their own way or MGTOW, pickup artists, and fathers' rights groups. So, and yes, Jordan, you are right. It's affecting women, but I'm saying it's infecting men. So I will get to my perspective on why it's affecting women, but it's infecting men. Because this group, and I will say that this is largely impacted by a man named Andrew Tate, which you can go and look him up. He's recently been banned from TikTok. Yes, and it would be affect, not effect, but fair enough. This is the type of man that highlights himself as a somewhat godly man while also simultaneously womanizing and degrading females, talking about how this is a more consistent thing, that out of one side of these folks' mouths, they want people, and I should say they want women that are, and again, this is not what I believe, so just so that we're clear here, but out of one side of their mouth, they say they want a woman that's submissive, that is loyal to them, specifically, monogamous. And then the other side of their mouth, they want 20 women all at the same time. They want them to look a specific way. They want them to, do whatever they say, not just like, they almost want them to also be exclusive to the one man too. They don't want them to go make their own money. They don't want them to have their own careers. They don't want them to be successful in their own right. They don't want them to be in the driver's seat of controlling a relationship or being in equal footing as a relationship. They are looking to control the narrative, and this is where the baked-in misogyny is. And it's incumbent upon someone like me, I think, to push back, because there's another guy on here, and my experience with a lot of these people are very specific. You have the quote, and it sounds silly when I'm talking it this way, like the men's rights activists and the MGTOWs are these people that are like super online, and they're like very locked into specific ideologies that are hard to break. They're hard to break because they're not based in full logic. There are sometimes grains of like, okay, men sometimes are treated poorly in, let's just say, divorce cases. Or disproportionately, and this is a fact, men, or not, maybe not disproportionately, but men make up the largest portion of people in prison. Now, again, it's not disproportionate because men commit the most violent crime, but there are these qualms that say like, okay, maybe there's some things that we should listen to here. Engaging in mental health practices, engaging in healthy, the healthy ability to reflect and grow as a man includes masculinity. Although let's also remind ourselves that like that's a loose term too, but masculine, the masculine nature can be used for good. It can be used to create drive. It can be used to, this is a simplistic form of looking at it, but it can be used to create testosterone, which is used to create muscle. I mean, I'm one of those people that's very into like lifting weights and doing this stuff where it's like, okay, it's not inherently masculine to lift weights, but having that certain like, ooh, like bang on my chest gorilla thing, like there's an okay time for that. There's a time and a place for competition, which again is labeled as masculine, but it's not necessarily. But the things that fall under that, what these guys are selling you online, and again, we will come back to this at some point again. I will have specifics, I will have videos, and I will have dissections of this because I think it's important. But I just want to lay the groundwork because this is going to be a long discussion over. This is like the new anti-SJW arc that these people are on. They're trying to rebuild like the ideal man, but the ideal man in their eyes is a flawed man in most people's actual, like in reality. These are people that are trying to sell you crypto schemes, get rich quick schemes. They're trying to sell you bullshit. They're trying to get you to sign up for classes that aren't going to actually help you. They're going to try to get you to pick up women that like are then these classes are going to help you manipulate and do all this stuff. So it's all nonsense. It's all used to just dig in and put like a wedge where there's already potential harm that has already been done. Because it's important to note, just because like we don't talk about it very often, the white male, the older white male suicidality has been going up. You look at college graduation, it's going down, especially in comparison to women. These are things that in isolation can be taken to an extreme. So when we talk about intersectionality, it's talking about, okay, we're going to fight for people of different genders. We're going to fight for people of different races, different religions. But it's not to fully discount the problems that people have that white men might have. And that might be not what everyone wants to hear. But it's important. Because if you want to build a bridge, you want to be like, here's the handout to build something stronger, you need to listen to everybody's problems and try to engage with them. Now, if their problem is, well, I don't like that person over there because they're a different color than me, that's unacceptable. If they say because, I want to subjugate women to be second-class citizens, it's unacceptable. But the way you beat them to the punch, basically, and I mean beat the scam artists to the people that you can connect with, is by providing them a logical and reasonable answer to the problems that they have. We talk about older white men that were sucked into the Trump, sphere. Some of these people voted for Obama. Some of these people were Democrats. They fall into this ability this trap. Some of them for the reasons that we highlighted, the bad reasons, but some of them because they just feel like they haven't been heard. That, in and of itself, sometimes is a fair thing to say. Now, the solution that they're jumping to is not. But sometimes people that feel unheard, sometimes people that feel like they've been left and cast aside, you take, like, the stereotypical, you take a coal miner from West Virginia, they might not care that we care about the climate, that we care about, and I don't mean that they don't care about the planet, but they might be out of a job. So myopically, they see, okay, Donald Trump is talking about giving me, a coal miner, back my coal mining job. That's what me and my grandfather and my grandfather before him did. That's the type of thing that we need to be able to speak to, listen to, and stop at the source, the pathway that leads someone down this manosphere or the red pill that is the right wing now. It's beneficial across the board to do it that way. I think that it requires more of a dive on the specifics of these people as they continue to grow, but we've seen it with Jordan Peterson and people falling into his hands. Now that guy has turned into a freak. I mean, that's probably the simplest way of putting it, frankly. Freaking out, eating just all beef diets, dying almost from apple cider. So he kind of seems like a weirdo now. So they moved on to the Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter or whatever he did that, like, Andrew Tate does, that he was this boxer, this kickboxer, whatever he did. I forget which MMA form he did. But because he's a tough guy, he does this, he has all these women, he has these nice cars. This is like they're trying to tap into that primal testosterone bit. So again, this is why understanding toxic masculinity and good masculinity and understanding where these things balance in each other. It just in the same way that femininity can be good and it can be used to manipulate. All of this stuff is good in balance. That's why we need people of all different genders, all different races, all different religions, and all different skin colors living in harmony and together, building off of each other, experiencing each other's relationships, because that is the melting pot of America. I guess that's the theme of today. That's the American dream. Obviously, I didn't dive, like waist deep into some of this stuff. We will eventually come back to this stuff, but I want to throw it on people's radars because the same way I will say, and I'm not tooting my own horn here, but in 2020, leading into 2021, talking about the winter of 2020, so like March, April, May, I was telling people, hey, school boards are going to be the big thing coming up in 2021. Hey, critical race theory is going to be the big thing. This was coming into the 2021 election. This like form of men's rights activism and this red pill stuff is the new form of the online right. This is the new version, and it's going more mainstream. It's the way that like Shapiro and Crowder have gotten to the mainstream. This is the way that these people are going to get their ideas into the mainstream. So take it seriously. Be willing and able to engage, and if you don't know how to, listen to it, record it, and just go and research, or go and ask somebody. Go and ask me. Go and ask somebody else. Because it's worth at least trying to debunk these things at the get-go so that you can engage with somebody on the factual level and maybe win them over. Or maybe just stop them from going down that path. Jordan, I don't think that anyone's not... you said that I don't think anyone is arguing that it isn't an upcoming issue. It's not that it's not an upcoming issue. It's that people don't see it coming. Maybe us as, young people that are online, we see it. We know. But the 45-year-old, the 50-year-old, the 65-year-old, they have no clue. Some of them don't even turn on Twitter or Facebook and YouTube. Now, there's plenty of people that do, but there are those people that they get their news from Facebook. And they're going to come across this Facebook video of this guy talking about this stuff, and that might tap into something, or there's kids or whatever. That's what I'm talking about. It wasn't like people didn't listen to me. People just ignored it. They said, okay, yeah, you're right, Connor. Yeah, school boards, whatever you say. And that's in local organizing. Maybe in other places they listened. Maybe they all knew and they knew how to react. I told them way in advance, and I'm just saying it now. I mean, I think we all are in agreement that it is an issue that's coming up. But it's important to bring up to the folks that might not know what the hell we're talking about. Like, hey, this exists over here, and it's coming to the mainstream. I mean, you look at the people that are getting, the young people in the Republican Party that are getting elected. This is the type of thing that they're running on. I mean, Ron DeSantis is no alpha male by any means, but that's the type of guy that's trying to utilize this. Donald Trump is no sigma male, but he is they have flags of him with Sylvester Stallone's body shooting, M16s with the American flag and a bald eagle flying over. That's what they're trying to tap into. And it's stupid. It looks silly. But there's a lot of people that like that stuff. So it's important to kind of understand what we're dealing with there and being willing and able to engage. So with all that being said, that is what I have for you tonight. I appreciate you guys sticking with me, engaging with the chat. It was a great chat. A sigma male is more alpha than an alpha male. I'll just leave it at that. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. The chat was astronomical. Love engaging with chat live here. If you guys are listening to the show or watching on YouTube, you can like the show by hitting the thumbs up button down below. You can subscribe to the show on YouTube. Hit the bell button to get notifications when we go live, which is every Wednesday. Now, we will also be having clips of the show going live on, usually I'm going to say Mondays and Fridays. We might have another one mixed in throughout the week as well. These are clips of the show, and eventually we're going to get clips, fresh clips that won't be live, but it'll just be me on camera. Those you will see. We will have clips of interviews, etc. coming up. So bell button so you don't miss those. Getting going. We got CB throwing. Let's get a Discord for the show. I will start a Discord for the program. I'll start it tomorrow maybe, and that way we can get an engaging chat going on when the show is not live, and we can get suggestions and all that stuff. And while we're at it, you can send suggestions to Greater Society Media, not podcast, Greater Society Media at gmail.com for guests, topics, send clips, anything that you want on the program. Then you can go over to social media where you can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook, Greater Society Media. You can follow me on Twitter at Con O'Hanlon. And if you would like to support the show for as little as $5 a month, you can do so on patreon.com/Greater Society Media. That's a good point. We have CB throwing a series called Great Points where we dig into certain issues. That might be a great suggestion for an upcoming series. I will take note of that. So let's get this channel to over 100 subscribers. I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but it would really help if we can get over to 100 subscribers. So get your friends, get your neighbors, get your grandma to hit the subscribe button on the channel down below and help us grow the progressive movement here in the U.S. and specifically coming out of Doylestown, Pennsylvania. And until next week, I will see you guys then. Stay safe. Peace.